All right. Okay, we're live. We're live with Robinson from Wormhole.
Dub
Whenever I think
Nation.
about, sorry.
Sorry, I had to say that. Dub Nation. Sorry.
Dub, Dub Nation, Dub
Dub
Nation.
Nation.
Yes, sir. And yeah, whenever I think about Wormhole, one of the things that usually stands out is you guys have the dopest sticker out there. And I always wonder, like,
Hmm.
how do you guys come up with it, and what like the thought process that went into it? Because it's like one of the things that clearly stands out. And yeah, would love to dive into that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't really have a thesis per se on tickers, but like here's the thing: there's only, at least in the English language, there's only a limited amount of single letter tickers. And we probably can anticipate some sort of mirroring of, let's just say, like the New York Stock Exchange market, or companies that go public on traditional markets, some sort of mirroring of that, right? So there's that like limited supply aspect. Um, and I think even more so it's magnified in crypto because there's way more tokens, right? So yes, there's way more tokens. There's also way more like crazy names for tokens as well. Like we're way more comfortable with, we're all familiar with many of the different crude tickers. But long story short, like I still think there's a lot of value in the single. And I actually think subsequently we've seen a lot of, after Wormhole did this, a lot of other tokens come out with single tickers. It was just kind of this like unthought of area, if you will. I don't know what everyone was nervous to do it, but like some example is Sonic. I think they did S.
Yeah.
There's Threshold
Sin
T.
Futures,
Someone did,
they did S.
yeah.
But Robinson, take us back to like that internal conversation where you were thinking of ticker names. Like I'm pretty sure people said Worm. I was personally rooting for
Whole,
Hole. Like I
whole.
think I think
Yeah.
Hole in One would have been so awesome. Like what was
Yeah.
the conversation internally? Like how did you end up with W? And what were all the sort of different options?
So here's the thing with wormhole as a word, it's like a cool word together, right? But when you separate the two, it's just like, God, I can't really do a lot with hole or worm. So whole was actually more than a consideration. It was actually what we would say internally, because before you have a token, you have to talk about it in various ways, right? So like there's a way you talk about it internally. So far as all the SAFs we signed, the token agreements we signed had whole as like it was going to be. So we didn't like worm, but we're like we could deal with whole. And some of these like bigger decisions, what happens is like if you give an opportunity like a few hours, so little do we have a few hours to riff with our colleagues. Unfortunately, we're always like going to back-to-back meetings and stuff. If you give a few hours, like good ideas can eventually come out from that. So we actually thought of W in, when was ECC in Paris in July, maybe 2023, is that the month it was, or something like that. And then just to give you context, we launched a token like 7 months later. So we were thinking about it like well before. One night it was like the end of the conference. I think it was a Friday night. We ended up actually going out for a few drinks. This is like one of those decisions that was actually made at a bar. We were at a table. We were having a few drinks, and we literally like. I'm not gonna say it was like J.K. Rowling and Harry Potter. I would never compare it to that, but it was very much so like napkin writing vibe. And we tried a bunch of stuff. It was like, what if we just did WH? What if we did WHL? What if we did WHLE? What if we did whole? What if we did worm? Like every variation we thought of. And W, when we first, like someone first mentioned it, it was like, no, we can never do that. Like you start to think about SEO with CoinGecko, you think about SEO with CoinMarketCap, you're like, W would be screwed, WBTC would come up. I mean, like every single like objection we thought of. But the more it like felt good. It felt like a good bet to take. W means win. And we eventually just kind of settled on it like a few days after that, like at night session in Paris.
Do you remember who first suggested it?
Oh, that's a hard one. I think it was either me or
Or
Dan.
like Glory Knight?
I maybe will give Dan the credit on this. I don't actually remember exactly, but I think it probably was him. And then he actually became the advocate, the strongest advocate for it. Like leaving the bar and like the subsequent days and weeks when we were figuring out like, okay, we're gonna launch a token. Like you gotta figure out the metadata. You gotta figure out all the stuff, aka the ticker. Dan was like pretty gung ho on making it W, and then it ultimately was. And look, I'm still bullish on Singer tickers. I think here's the thing though, or single letter tickers, excuse me, is that when we did that, it takes a while to launch a token. So like we're gonna see this like delayed effect of more teams doing it. I think that's already what we're seeing. Like we just mentioned a few names already. So I think we'll see more. There's probably already like 8 out there. So you know what, 18 to go. Let's go, folks.
And also, like one final thing on that is, in the initial days, were there people confused when they were trying to buy it on exchanges, buying one token for the other? Any instances like that?
Well, I actually kind of briefly said this, but like, and here's the thing: when you launch a token, there's so much shit you don't remember or you don't think about. Like one of those things is CoinMarketCap and CoinGecko. Like for some reason, there are things everyone uses. I didn't realize CoinMarketCap was more of a boomer tool. By the way, I was recently told
Yeah.
this by my team. I still use CoinMarketCap daily, but I guess I'm a boomer. But that was one where I was like, oh shoot, the SEO might be screwed up on this. We actually went to the individual exchanges in CoinMarketCap and CoinGecko, anywhere where you would maybe type in W, and like worked with them to try and say like, actually, if you type in W, the first thing that should come up is the shortest. And so I'm pretty sure on most of them, Wormhole's pretty high up, but some of them it may still not be.
Yeah, I think as these tools get better, like when you search W right now, you probably see like some wrapped version, like wrapped ETH, for instance. But as they get better in like the 10 or 20-year horizon, tokens with more volume and liquidity will sort of rank up, and these tools will deprioritize them when tokens get a lot more. It's really interesting, Robinson. Like, did the ticker name have an influence on like the rebrand as well? Like we earlier had like the circle logo, and then it became like this W. Was that also part of the consideration, or was the rebrand always in like conversation?
Before
I
you
think
jump
it
in,
was a little.
I want to say I'm
Go.
pretty jealous of your hat. You were wearing the hat.
We got to
And
send out more
I'm
swag.
just gonna say, like everything KG says, like I have not asked him to say, like he is endorsing or he's bullish on Wormhole on his own. But yeah,
Dub, what do we say now? W Nation. Yeah, we got to get you a swag pack. Also, we got way more swag coming out. It's interesting. There's like this move towards more streetwear type swag. I think everyone's just like fed up of the black tees and the windbreakers and stuff. So there's like a really good. I'll just shout out a few, like Jito, I think has good swag. New Research, NOUS Research. They have really cool swag. So anyway, we've got some new stuff coming out too. So just be ready. But I guess to go back to the question, it was a little bit of like a happy accident, I'm not gonna lie, where both things were coinciding together. One, I think it's important to like check in with maybe your direction, your audience, and make sure your brand still is like in line with who you're speaking to. You know, for us, I think at Wormhole, we were starting to kind of go through a little maturing stage, if you will, where it was kind of like very much so DeFi degen, which it still is, but there's more facets to it, right? We wanted to start talking to like a broader, more, you know, now we would say more institutional brand, but just kind of like sharpen up the branding a little bit. And then it also coincided with, okay, you know, now that we're launching this token, we have to think about one thing you don't think about is like, what's the token brand? Like, what does that look like? You know, that's a conversation, that's a couple meetings that actually go on to figure out, right? And in what we realized too is a lot of tickers are actually a version of the first letter. I think I would have to go and double check that. I think Cardano's not, but like, you know, Solana maybe is a good example. I guess ETH totally screws that one up, but Bitcoin with the B, right? So we were like, you know, a lot of like, you know, bigger projects, some of the biggest have this, and this just seems like kind of the way to do it. Otherwise, it would have been like these 3 circles, right? It would have been like, or we had the original rings, which I still love the rings. Don't get me wrong. Like I actually look kind of fondly on that older brand, but I think just to summarize, it was a little bit of a sharpening up of like, you know, the overall brand and you know, who our audience was, and then it just so coincided with when we were going to launch the token. I will say it's very good to do a rebrand when you're close to launching a token, as like a strategy for anyone that's like going through this. It adds this additional like attention grabber that I think is really important. And when you launch a token or do any sort of big launch, attention is probably the most valuable asset in this space. And you have what I would like to think about as like a couple drumbeat moments. And like a rebrand is actually a good like first drumbeat. It's like, okay, they're caring about their image all of a sudden. There's probably a reason why they're caring about their image. And then you can, you know, follow on with the other big stuff.
Yeah,
100%.
probably cook the. No, no, I was just
You
gonna say
got
like they'll probably cook the marketing team. Like, imagine rebranding and then launching a ticker like the next month. Like,
Everyone was
like
cooked, man. It was just like,
yeah,
like 6 months of sprinting. You know, I recently had a conversation with the team and they're like, yeah, we're going to launch a token in like the next month. And I was like, have you started anything? They're like, no. I was like, I don't know if that's possible, but you know, I guess nowadays tools and things are getting better and faster every week. So maybe you could do it now, but it takes time.
And also, like before the rebrand you're talking about, there was another rebrand previous to that. Why did that happen?
Yeah, I mean that was like the original brand was kind of like done by almost like it was more of like a developer brand. You know, we love I mean we can't developers are the most important in the space. But if there's anything we probably all can agree on with crypto, it's 50% marketing, 50% tech. Unfortunately or fortunately, like I play the game or the ball as it is on the field, right? And that's the case. So the original one was very much so just like a quick slap. This is when the tech was very raw at Jump, right? When we were all at Jump, it was literally just a token bridge between Solana and Ethereum, almost built as a tool to solve a problem that you know the trading guys were having, right? And so it wasn't thought as much about like, oh, this thing needs this robust brand. And then we did go through the first one that was, you know, I would say is pretty early on, but it was more that was kind of like our DeFi S brand, and we actually didn't really fully know the vision of what Wormhole could be yet, and which it sounds kind of maybe too much almost like that you need a vision before a brand, but I think actually like understanding where you're going and almost kind of backtracking fully is super important. A lot of people try to bake some sort of brand and go to market before they actually understand the 5 to 10 year, and it's really hard. And I think a good example of someone who does this really well, I hate to like toot this person's horn a bit more, like, you know, but is Tesla in particular, Elon, like, you know, the vision reflects the brand. So the vision used to be, we want to build this robotics, or I'm sorry, I just totally blew the punchline. We want to build this like autonomous vehicle company, right? We want to build like the, you know, Tesla, well, as we know it today. And that was great. And then all the branding can kind of fit into that. But then, okay, how do you go? It's $1 trillion. Like if you, that's a big, you've already done a lot. How do you extend the vision from there? Oh, you say we're going to be a $10 trillion company by saying we're going to be a robotics company. You watch, I bet the Tesla brand will start to change towards what would more just give you like a robotics feel, robotics messaging, that type of direction. And I view our evolutions as somewhat similar.
and like Robinson, when we think about sort of the recent rebrands that some of these projects have done, like almost every one of them have faced like backlash. Did that happen to Wormhole during any two of these rebrands where people like, what is this? Like, why did they even do this?
So I got a lot of shit about W. I actually remember enough. I was in New York. I went to this one like event, and it was one of those New York events where there was like a lot of like KOLs, probably KOLs that you know we would all be familiar with. And I was shopping around the ticker feedback at the time. I felt like it was a good crowd to like shop around feedback. So I was like, yeah, no, Hole's what we were gonna do, but we're actually thinking about doing W. And they were like, oh my gosh, you can't do W. You got to do Hole. Hole's so memeable, all this stuff. So I was like, I left that and I was like, shit, maybe I like, it's hard to know sometimes what feedback to take. I was like, maybe I should take this. And there was even some like, I don't know if it was investors, but there was a lot of people that were skeptical. But I would say after about the first month, we knew the feedback was good. You know, that a lot of people were like, this was great. I love W. You know, a lot of people aren't going to say they hate something to your face, but there's a select few. Those select few people that I trust said they liked it. So I felt like we were in a good spot at then. But we did face a lot of backlash initially. You know, one of the rebrands that I think, you know, I'm thinking of Jaguar. Funny enough, I'm thinking of, you know, I love this team. We work with them closely, but Sky, candidly, like Sky got a lot of backlash. But
Yeah.
sometimes I'm like of two thoughts. One thought is, you know, there are a lot of bad rebrands out there, but like there's also the any press is good press, and eventually people just adopt it. So what I mean by that is like, you know, people talking about how bad a rebrand is giving you attention. And like, again, tension's the most valuable resource, even if it isn't all positive. And eventually people just get used to something. I think a lot of backlash happens when there is like change. People inherently don't like change. And so if there's like a rebrand and there's, it's not maybe the best, it could have been done a little bit better. That little disruption of like, ooh, I'm uncomfortable with change happens. But I think people eventually will be totally fine with Sky. Candidly, with Sky in particular, I think USDS is a great rebrand. It's like in line with all the other stablecoin tickers. DAI was just like very random, in my opinion. Sky, I think, Sky itself is even not the worst thing. Like MakerDAO, what kind of like, so I've actually come around to it as well. When it first came out, I was like, I don't know if I love this, but now I actually think it's good.
I think once you have like 500 million or more in like TVL, no one really cares. Like, that's probably the next rebrand.
I think one thing I personally didn't come around is Twitter changing to X, probably. One thing that everyone is still call it to Twitter, not X.
Well, it's so hard. That one's really hard because you don't have the verb proliferation. Like there's no way to say like tweet. Like that's what I struggle with. So I'll call it X. I finally call it X, but I still say I tweeted something or look at this tweet. It's hard because post can be anything. Post could be like, look at this post on Slack, look at this post on I guess X, look at this, but like, so it's a little, that one's particularly hard because the verb is really like, I don't know what to use.
Yeah. So bringing this back to like, the inner stories at Wormhole, like Robinson, I know you mentioned like getting, rough feedback from like conferences and in person. What about your life as a founder on crypto Twitter? Like, do people just at you and like just shit on Wormhole? Like, how do you deal with that stuff? Like, I've always been curious with this. Like, is that something you deal with or you look at or engage with?
Yeah.
Like, how does that happen?
Yeah, I kind of have to have somewhat of a filter. Like I actually love getting feedback in DMs. Like sometimes I'll go back and forth with someone at the DM or even like support. I like to like someone has an issue and helping them with support. So I have gone back and forth substantially sometimes with some folks in DMs, but I would say 80% of it is garbage. And I think it's really hard for any founder in crypto. And here's like one of the main reasons I would say why, if I were to like zoom out a little bit. And this is, I'm going to go on a tangent, but I'm going to bring it back. The liquidity time horizon in crypto is like unlike anything we've ever seen, right? Like if you have a company, you found a company and it going public, going it public is, anyone's dream. Now going public in crypto is like, it's commoditized. Like anyone can go public. Technically Pumped Out Fund is like a going public machine, right? But so the liquidity time horizon is so much shorter, something that I don't think any industry's ever seen. And what happens is like, you get these stakeholders that care, not because they're altruistic, but because they are able to buy into the project, but buy it at a point where it's not like substantially mature, right? A lot of times. So it creates this like on top of this like really close communication with people building it, right? These two things I think are, somewhat new. This one you could say like anyone could reach out to, I don't know, like Zuckerberg or Elon on Twitter. So you make an argument this is like, not just crypto, but I think these two things combined make it really, really difficult, to sometimes split out the feedback, because you have these rabid community because they own the tokens. And then, you have not a super mature project in a lot of cases, a lot of time compared to a public company. And then you have this close communication, this access to the people building it. And it's like this recipe to make building something so much harder. And I think everyone kind of has to go through a moment of taking a step back and realizing this. And my example was actually staking for W. Like, and why it's important is because like you're constantly hit with product priorities all the time, right? Like what is a priority, what's not a priority, and you kind of have to prioritize that. And this loud voice on Twitter and your DMs, even in Telegram DMs, is going to push you to friggin' prioritize things, maybe not what's actually optimal for Wormhole in the long term. Of course, I want, people the token to do well. Anyone wants a token to do well, but I'm here for the long term, right? And a lot of builders say that. I hope Wormhole's kind of proven that with 4 years plus at this point. But like, we're here for the long term. So I'm building for medium long term, right? And so it just runs counter to what this like really loud voice wants. And so that was maybe a slight mistake I made. Maybe not mistake, but like I let that influence my judgment a little bit, like the loud voice, to where I maybe would have done things differently if I was a little bit more used to it.
And I think these voices get even louder when it's the time for airdrops. So like during that phase, what is it like in terms of conversations with the team? What is the community like? And yeah, what is the initial phase when the airdrop is going on?
Yeah, so I'm gonna give a shout out to a good friend of mine, Kevin. A lot of people know him as the intern. He framed sometimes like I'm big on like just broad mental models to then take action from. He framed this really well to me. It is all about attention, and you want to farm for those that are farming, right? Like you want to. There's true community members. I do still believe that there's people that just really like what you're building and are really behind that. But like for those people who are coming to farm, you actually want to farm them back, which sounds weird, and then bring them into this cohort bucket of people who care. And so, you're almost wanting that attention, right? It's your moment for that attention. But what the most critical point, I would say there's actually two. How do you drum that attention up, which we could talk about? And then the second critical point is like, how are you farming the farmers, if you will? And the first one, I'll go back to what I was saying, like the drum beat is, or the drum beats, it's a pretty textbook approach, but it works, but you just got to execute on it well. It's fundraise. Hey, we've got a good amount of money. A couple months later, you got eyeballs. People are like, oh shit, there's money. This is real. They got good backers. Couple months later, hey, here's a rebrand. We care about what we look like, right? We're about to go on the dating scene, if you will, right? So you do the rebrand. Then you start, maybe your products are doing well. Hopefully you have a product that's out or close to out, but like you could start posting stuff, getting people excited, or, testnet is fast, things like that, getting people excited. Then whatever the airdrop is, that's your third drum beat, right? So fundraise, rebrand, airdrop. Then you have your TGE, excuse me. And ideally after the TGE, you're never going to be able to keep the hype up. I think a lot of projects get stressed and anxious about like, how the hell do I keep this hype train going? It never happens. It just isn't. The way to work is you just really take advantage of the peaks, rest, really take advantage of the peaks, and you have to know when those are coming to and start to lean into them. And ideally you're kind of generating them. So long story short, I guess I'm getting on tangents like I oftentimes do. I think the most important thing is like is having structures to farm the farmers. So like establishing your funnel. A lot of people use Discord as like a top of funnel thing, right? I think you can do a lot of different stuff. Some people are trying out Telegram. I'm not here to maybe say the exact specific methods, but there's a lot. We use Discord, right? So first you want to say you want your basic like qualification level. Let's say that's a role in Discord or something. Like I think ours was like a role called early, right? So if you're early, that's our first cohort. So we have 40,000. Then of those early, if they give us wallet addresses, maybe we can also see like if they have a lot of usage, right, on Wormhole or Portal or any one of Wormhole powered products, mine, etc. Then we can kind of bring them down a little bit more. Then we can say like, oh, here are the ones on Twitter, maybe use a Twitter API that really post a lot about Wormhole. All of a sudden you're like, bring down this cohort of people that are like actually really engaged. And then those are the ones you invest in. The rest, just let them be loud voices and don't give a shit. No offense to the farmers out there, but like they just don't give a shit. This cohort, you invest in the ones that are investing in you. And I think that was one of the biggest learnings. We learned it on the fly. And again, I got a lot of good feedback from some friends in the space. But I think that playbook is really solid. And I think others that are doing airdrops should think in the same. The mechanics as you go down are different. That's fine. But think in the same mental model.
Was there anything that legal said you cannot do during that?
Yeah, I mean, look, here's the thing is like, this is a hard question to answer because not because I can't say anything because illegal, but like at every turn, there's like, can we do this because illegal, right? Like even the early Discord tag was like a conversation because like early, maybe like pre-references, there's a token without us actually coming out with official comms, and the official comms would have to say specific things about utility and all that stuff, right? So, my cheating answer would be every decision. Let's just like view this funnel, this airdrop funnel. There is like annoying amount of legal questions.
Yeah.
You know, the VPN is another big one. How they claim terms of service on the page, like every little thing you have to think of. And you know, my hope is that we get a lot more clarity so that like, you know, a token launch actually doesn't, or an airdrop doesn't cost founders tens of, if not hundreds of thousands of
Yeah.
dollars in legal fees, which it does for probably most people
And
today.
and to flip that, like, did your engagement sort of 10x during that phase where it was like speculative that Wormhole was doing an airdrop? Like, were everyone just sort of engaging with you on Twitter?
Me personally or Wormhole?
Yeah, you personally.
Oh yeah, token power is a real thing. Like I actually like think that I roll my eyes a little bit about with some like crypto founders and like the followers and things like that give them this like ego. It's so much a token, really truly. And I think like if you can come to terms with that, you can, I don't know, it helps you as a person. Like don't I think some people, and you know, I actually not thinking of anyone in particular off the top of my head, but I've seen it and thought this many times. It's like you're a product of a token. You're a product of a project you've built that launched a token. Don't get me wrong, there's merits in that for sure. And it's impressive. And if it were easy, anyone could do it. Like I adhere to all those phrases, but just token power is a real thing. People care about the token and making money for themselves. They don't care about you that often, and they don't care about your thoughts that often, right? So absolutely. But there's also something to be said, but I'll pause.
No. So just sort of adding on to that, I think was like your in real life experience at conferences different pre-token than post-token? Like were people nicer to you back then?
Yes. And I get a lot of questions about the token. Funny enough, man, like I remember one of the just going back to something I said when I'm trying to remember the timeline. I don't remember the exact timeline, but before we launched staking, it was like the Singapore run up, the Korea blockchain week last year. It was Korea blockchain week. Then it was I think it was something in Hong Kong. I could be wrong. Not Hong Kong. There was like 3 conferences in a row. Breakpoint was one of them. Token 2049 was the other. There we go. 3. There was nothing in Hong Kong. That was like peak when staking for me. Peak. So many people came up to me and just would talk about staking. And I was like, for context, Wormhole staking is a little bit more difficult because we don't have it's not proof of stake network, right? So we have to have different staking mechanisms that take time to build safely. And so like that's the real reason, but no one gives a shit about that. Really when they say when staking, they're like when yield, right? So that was like peak, just nonstop. And it does take a good bit not to get annoyed. Like I actually like a lot of respect for people like Tolly, for instance. Like he's super, like he is, you know, stratosphere when it comes to crypto. Super patient dude. You know, always willing to answer questions, always willing to give people time of day. And I can only imagine the amount of dumb shit people ask him. So it's props to him.
And also, coming back to the token, how does it like feel when certain communities kind of raid because of the incentives you're providing them, like Mad Lads, Monad communities? So how does that kind of feel? And also, what went into the decision making of incentivizing or siding with specific communities for your?
Yeah. So I think one thing with Wormhole is we are truly a product and engineering first organization. Like we're probably predominantly still product and eng. We had a product live for like 2.5 years. It actually goes into our airdrop. I think it was one of the most wallets ever. And I say this because like we really focused on the product, which it makes sense because it spans across, you know, so many chains, 5 different virtual machines. It's been a lot of like technical work, but that's a great basis to come from because it's like, holy shit, there's actually so much stuff that you guys do. Then you can talk about it. Where in a lot of time in crypto, it's like talking about all the stuff you will do. So for us, we actually came from a position where a lot of projects I don't think come from, where you know you're coming from a place you've built something. How do you build a community? And so at the time, like when we were thinking about how to design like our go to market and this one opportunity to ultimately build a community, you know, it was interesting because Wormhole's in this unique spot, right? Blockchains are make sense in the book. The playbook is like dialed. It's like you have this one silo, this echo chamber, and you're just going to bullpost the blockchain. You're going to bullpost all the projects that are going to come on it, the TVL, all those metrics, right? And it becomes really specific to, it's us against the world. It's this blockchain against the world. My bags against yours. With Wormhole, what's interesting is like, and you kind of had to figure this out from a higher level, is like the community is across all these, it's my PvP blockchains, like it's my world versus yours. So it was almost like hard for us to actually find our own community and identity, because we were just moving between all these different like cliques, if you will. Like I always think in like world analogies, it's like almost like high school. It's like the person who's friends with everyone but friends with no one in a way. And so that was like the premise we were coming from, and that may be a little too high level, but I think it's important to think about things through lenses like this. And so we were like, okay, if we're kind of in the middle, how do we establish I want a Wormhole native community, which I feel like we do have now, which I'm grateful for, but like just rewinding a little bit. And so we're like, where are our strongest cohorts? That was the question. It was like, we have to start from somewhere. And so when I think about some of Wormhole's strongest cohorts, I think of a few chains. We're agnostic, but this is how it's played out. Solana, of course, right? Solana will always be. It's really kind of where we started. Then you have Sui, very strong for Wormhole. I would say a few EVM chains, like I think maybe like an Arbitrum, if you will. But then Monad, just to summarize a little bit. Then Monad, and we did some stuff with Mainnet too. And so we're like, okay, these are really strong communities. These people already enjoy Wormhole. They're already familiar with Wormhole. Let's tap and invest in those. And so that was like community bucket. What I do want to say is like we already had a lot of users, like 1 million wallets. So we invested the most there. But while we're talking about community, so that was kind of like the impetus of the why around that. We were just saying like these are already somewhat strong communities. Let's make them actual Wormhole native. And then we proceeded to go down, get a bit more tactical and say, okay, how we approach Monad, how we approach Solana, how we approach Sui, Ethereum, and so on.
And do you see like ricochet effects of the incentivization that Wormhole did at that time to like present day, where these communities still love Wormhole because of it, or part of the reason why they're still part of the community?
Yeah, I think the airdrop model in general deserves some like scrutiny, or like, I mean, just look at Barra recently, right? Like it's just a lot of it is ultimately a lot of dumping. And that's okay, because maybe these people farmed a lot of stuff, gave you a lot of attention for a while, and this is in fact their payday. And like, you can't criticize the dumpers. You have to design a system to make them not do that or do what you want, right? And so what I'll say is that I think it worked. I partially worked and partially didn't, and I'll explain. One thing I will recommend, just tactical recommendation for any airdrop, is lock it up if you can and drip it. Like have it be like daily, have it be weekly. Because what you want to do is, again, you're competing for attention, and if there's something monetary attached, you're likely going to have that attention. It's just it's a completely tokenized economy. That's what we're building. And so with Mad Lads, actually, I think it went flawlessly. I had multiple people reach out to me, like very reputable people in the space, like that was so cool. We want to do the same thing. That was genius. Like a lot of people loved that, and I to this day I think it works well. And to this day, like shout out Mad Vincent, shout out Solana Coach, shout out, like there's some true Mad Lad Wormhole homies and community members that do so much. So I would say that worked really well. Monad worked well. Like, look, there's still a lot of strong Monad communities, but that I wouldn't put this as Monad specific, but it was more on like the dumping side of things. So I probably would have tried to figure out a more interesting way to drip that over time and keep that attention, design a system for that. So I would say partially, I wouldn't have invested as much in like where I thought as there was going to be as much dumping. And I think the thing we got the most criticism for the airdrop, and I'll wrap up, is we airdropped 6% of total supply. So I don't know, Wormhole's what, at like it varies. It's like at 2 billion or something, right? So 6% is substantial. And at the time it was significantly higher. And what we got criticized for was we airdropped a lot to these NFT communities, and people said we weren't airdropping to our users, when in reality we gave 5% in aggregate to the users, 1% to these communities. But the other piece of feedback I'd probably give is always understand what the screenshot will be. So like, even though the aggregate number is great. When you divide that across 400,000 user IDs, it's significantly less of a W amount than the 4,000 Mad Lads that got 16,000 W, right? So that was a huge learning, is like, if it can be screenshotted and it's not favorable, it will be screenshotted and used against you, is the short term, or the summary there.
And then after the
And also, I
airdrop, did
think,
your
like,
engagement on Twitter? Sorry. And then after the airdrop, did your engagement on Twitter go down, Robbie?
No, actually.
No?
Yes and no. Yes and no. Like, I think my inorganic, we have to describe organic and whatnot, but like, I think there was a bunch of bots that were botting like anything, probably like 3 to 4 weeks leading up. And this is everyone, by the way. This is like, I see it with every airdrop. So like, there would be posts you would make that was just be like, I would do, like, it was when Dune was launching, I would do a Dune like video of like Thumper with the sandworm coming. It would get like 1,600 likes, right? Like, just like absurd. However, I would say like the real engagement, real meaning like token holder engagement, so call that inorganic, organic, whatever, it stayed strong. I think they want updates. I'm responsible for giving a lot of those updates and being real about it. So it definitely dropped for sure, but I don't think it dropped in a negative way. I much prefer it the way it is right now.
That makes sense. And I know we're at time, but like, last question. I know that you've been spending a lot of, so I obviously know because I work with you, but you've been spending a lot of time with, that's a call out that every podcast should make, I guess. But anyway, I know that you've been spending a lot of time with institutions. How does it feel doing institutional BD versus like the traditional crypto BD? Like, when you're in those offices, like, how do you feel? Do you feel out of place? Do you feel like the institutions are coming? Walk us through your thought process, like getting ready for that meeting. Like, is it different going to like a crypto meeting? Like, how do you sort of go about that?
Do you suit up?
It's it's so different. Oh my gosh. Yes, to answer your question, I don't always suit up, but I dress much nicer. Like, I deliberately think about it. And we have some upcoming meetings next week, which are going to be great in DC, and definitely we'll suit up there. But I would say it's a good question. I haven't thought too much about it. I've just naturally kind of prioritized what I think is best for Wormhole and forced myself to figure out how to act and be in that environment. So, maybe not the best answer, but what I can say is it's definitely different. I think in crypto, we're really good at learning. That's like one skill that a lot of good founders have, is they're just really good at adapting and learning, because you have to respond to narratives, you have to respond to noise, you have to know how to be financially literate, but also technically literate. Those are just difficult things. Also build a company, like, those are a lot of difficult things to do. So, I think it's just been like a fast learning curve. But it's definitely different. You definitely have to be more mature. And I think one thing I would always say is, in crypto, sometimes we're bad at asking for help. Like, people want to feel like they can do it all. They want to feel like they're like, God mode. They're afraid to say, I don't know, type situation. I've really leaned on a lot of people. Like, we're hiring more, I would say, mature institutional people that I hope to learn from. I want people that are coming on the team to scare me, because I feel like they're better than me at what I do. And like, a lot of people don't want that. They want to hire and maintain control. I want to hire and feel like scared that you're going to do better than me. And I think a lot of the people we've been hiring lately, very experienced. I would almost think we're going through, like, I don't want to compare us to Coinbase, but like, it is going through that like Coinbase maturing. You're hiring a lot of these people that have done similar versions before. You can educate them on the crypto side. They can educate you on the institutional, but you have to be open to learning, and be willing to.
Yeah. If we clip this out and this clip gets 200 likes, would you do like a OTT D video before you go to your next institution meeting?
I was like, OTT, you said the D.
OOTD, yeah.
Oh my gosh. I mean, you're calling me out. I can't say no. But let's up the likes. I'll say,
Okay.
if you clip this out, it gets 300 likes, I'll do an OOTD video. We're upping the likes.
Okay.
It's gonna be a great outfit, so you're gonna wanna learn.
Yeah.
It's gonna be the best. It's gonna be the best outfit.
All right. Cool. Yeah, Robinson, thank you so much for tuning in. This was really great. Yeah, thanks so much for your time.
Go Dub Nation.
Thanks for having me.
Let's
Thanks,
go
guys.
Detonation. Thanks, Robinson.